This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your host, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. We've got another episode for you, and we're going to be talking about mastering delegation.
Something I'm probably not very good at.
Yes. Well, hey.
We were just talking about that, right?
We were just talking about that, but, you know, throughout the years of building businesses, like I feel like we've gotten a lot better at it. So, and I know that business owners and entrepreneurs out there listening to this, right? This is hard for us because as an entrepreneur, we really feel like we have to do everything ourselves, right? And then we get to a point where we're not growing and scaling. And then you have to sit back and say, you know what, like, why am I not growing and scaling my business? And then if you really peel out the layers, it's really comes down to you are too much in the weeds of doing things and you can't let go because either you're afraid to, or you don't trust your teams that, you know, they can do it, right? And a lot of times you think, oh, well, I can do it better myself, right? But to be honest with you, we are only probably good at one thing. Like we all have skill sets, and we got to figure out what that skill set is, and that's where you need to be. Everything else should be delegated, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know where to start with all that. Yes, to
a lot to unpack right there.
So, I mean, I grew up in my dad, my grandfather were carpenters and all that, but they're very much there's nobody better that can do it than themselves.
Perfectionist, right?
They're perfectionists. So they were very hands-on, they ran small businesses and mainly focused around them. So when they retired, the business closed because there was no really sellable business, because it was just it was named after our last name, Wolfswinkel Enterprises. So you can't go much further than that. And so it was, and so that's just the nature of you build a business around yourself. It's not sellable. It's not scalable. You're too involved in, right. And they just did that because they were very good at their craft, but nobody could do it better than them. And so it was hard for them to delegate and they did in some instances, but for the most part,
and you truly become the bottleneck of your business, right? I mean,
correct.
Several years ago, I remember you and I were, for the most part, building it all ourselves, right? And it came to a point where it was difficult. And I remember this conversation with you, like when we hired our first virtual assistant, you're like, man, like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't want to let go of things. Right. And we had to like physically pull things from you.
There were certain things
in order for,
correct.
The VA to take over. And that was hard for you.
Yeah. And there were certain aspects that it's harder to release, especially like financial, some of the, I wanted to make sure that, and then there's some things that it's okay to still hang on to. Like we had built really good connections and relationships with our investors and people that we worked with over the years. And so it's hard to let some of that go because some of those but you can't do that at large scale. You can't be involved with everything day to day. But, what was something you were thinking as you were talking that I was picturing in my brain is that, I think we heard this on a podcast recently, but, and it's happened in our own business where we were growing at like anywhere. So our first couple of years when we started our property management company, we were growing at like 100% growth rate. So every year we were doubling our income and doubling our gross. And it was several years like that. And you almost come accustomed like, well, that's how you get just that good. And then we got down to like, 50%. And then we went down to like 30% as we kept growing. And then we've had some years where it's like you didn't grow at all. We as many doors as we brought in, we lost out the back end. And then you're like thinking, man, and we also look at some of those years and it's like we were heavily involved in just the day-to-day operation. So it used to be all focused on growth, scaling and marketing and sales and all that. And then all of a sudden you get very involved in the weeds, right? And very involved in the day-to-day, and you're trying to fix the systems and you're trying to improve the communication and retaining clients where all your energy's there and it's not on the growth and scaling and all that. So it's a tough balance and we've still done that.
It really, it is a tough balance. And I mean, we hear from a lot of franchises that we help, right? And I think that's probably the biggest struggle that they go through is that, they don't see the growth because they are doing everything and stuck in the weeds.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that. And it's hard when you're small and you don't have a lot of, financial backing. And so you're putting everything in your business. You're the financer because you're putting in your own sweat and tears and labor to make it happen. And you got to come to a point where you start delegating and letting some of those go to remote team members, to on-site employees. And eventually you'll start seeing the positive is that a lot of times they can do it better than you can. And there was many instances where I let go in TTK and man, they were able to systemize running the rehabs, the building, of the homes, the coordinating, all that way better than I ever could.
Right. Yeah. And we tell this story a lot because Shawn and I took a month off. It was, it's been a while now. I want to say 5 years ago, right?
We've done it a couple times.
Yes.
First time.
But the first time we did. And so in our whole thought process of taking a month off was, okay, let's go ahead and what are the things that we're doing in our business that we can delegate off to somebody else, right? And so we made a goal that with the year's period, we'll get everything in place so that way we can go ahead and hand that off because we totally wanted to take a month off, like no distractions, like fully engaged with our children, right? And we did that. So we got everything in place, you especially, because you had a lot of things on your plate that you needed to get rid of. And when we left on vacation, like everything was handled, right? The business might have not grown and didn't have like the drive that we would have probably brought to it, but everything, processes were in place, and the employees did a fantastic job when we delegated off, when we let them own that.
Yeah. And you get to see, like, we had some scenarios where we probably needed to incentivize the growth and put in some measures to help that growth or create the appetite still to grow while we weren't there. We were still, I think, providing that, and that's the only thing. But yes, absolutely, the business on a day-to-day ran as it should.
Right.
So, that's what it should happen. We, what was I going to say with that? Go ahead.
I was going to say one question I have for you is, okay, so for those that are struggling with like delegation, like what tips would you give them? Like, what's the biggest, I guess, challenge or how can they overcome their own internal battles with being able to delegate? Yeah,
I mean, there are a couple of things. So one thing why I think it's helped us over the years is EOS. And so we've created, we've created strong core values so that the core values are kind of like the bumper cars that keeps the staff and people in between the lanes, so that they know, because they have strong core values of where they're headed and what they govern by, and how they run, how they make their decisions. Right. It's got to follow your core values. The second thing was within EOS is a strong org chart and a strong organizational chart where we have clear direction, responsibilities, what you're responsible, what your role is responsible, who you report to. And so then that creates stronger, I think, delegation of who you can delegate to and who you report to and who's responsible for what. And the other point with EOS, and when we implemented that, and this has been now like 5 years of running on it, from what I've heard, it takes a full 18 months for you to really get things going. So then we created, strong meeting schedule. We created a format where we have rocks. We use a system called 90 to track everything and monitor everything. But people are assigned rocks, people for the year, for the quarter. There's ownership of those rocks, so you know who's responsible for what, and that's the key is just that you might own something, but doesn't mean you have to actually do the day-to-day. So that's where I could let go and say, okay, yes, I still own this. So I own the result of it, the outcome of it, but doesn't mean necessarily I'm doing the day-to-day of it. So then you can bring your team and team members involved and delegate, because you know what you need to accomplish. Now it's delegating to the rest of your team, the to-dos, the responsibilities, and then maybe even sub-rocks for them, in our sub-teams that they do to meet the bigger rocks. So I think that gives you like a little bit vision or an outline for how do you accomplish some of those delegations. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's I love that, because you're right. Because I think a lot of times, just because you have the rock doesn't mean you actually have to do the day-to-day in it. That makes, that's awesome. You give that out to your team members to be able to handle that, and you can oversee it.
Yeah. And then a lot of times it's just processes and procedures. So just your SOPs on how you do certain tasks. And so we've gotten a lot better at that too. So a lot of times why you don't delegate is because it's hard to teach or it's hard to train. You have to retrain. Or you
say,
take the time.
You have to take the time. You don't have the time. And so, and
then you have to create, and then usually it's on you to create the process and procedures to know how a team member knows how to do that task. And that's what we did when we went on that vacations. I had to create a bunch of SOPs that I had to implement for okay, we have a closing on Friday. What do you need? How do you read the HUD? How do you know if it's correct? How do you send the wire for closing? Who is signing on my, if I'm not here, who's going to sign the HUDs and who's going to sign the closing docs? So I got to assign somebody then now they got to read all those instructions and know what there's, what for the company. And so, or if we have a sale, the same thing. Or if we have to raise money for that property, okay, who's going to go?
Right.
So there was a lot of financial things on the buying and selling that we had to create SOPs for. So and a lot of that it was all in my head. So that was the biggest problem. So you got to get it on paper.
And I think that's a struggle for a lot of business owners, that it's all in their head, right? And they're afraid to let that go, and because they don't know where to even start, right? Well, I mean, I think it's not going to be perfect, but I also think that delegating to somebody else, even though it's all in your head, that person can help you create the process for that.
Correct.
Right? Because at the end of the day, most likely you're not going to get it done because you don't have the time to do it. Yeah. Right.
And this has all been done over years. So and it's usually long-term project. I know as entrepreneurs, you like to just I'm going to create now and get it done. And it usually doesn't all happen like that. So for us, we did everything from you and I creating checklists. In the very, very beginning, we did checklists, we had paper checklists, and that would create the process and procedures so I could delegate this task of doing a renewal or doing a lease application. And so the person would just follow the checklist, and they would have a checklist on top of every application, and you would review the check, and you would have everything, and it was a packet, and you could go through it. That was the old school way, but that worked at that time. Then we had somebody come into our business and document the entire process for everything we do in our business. So they created flow charts, they documented the process in a PDF, and we use that. And then from there, we built process procedures. And then we took a next step. And we put it into a software where it first lived in Asana. So then we put all our checklists, everything in Asana. So we ran our entire business checklists and tasks and procedures out of Asana. So Asana would create a task, it would come up with create a process, it would come up with a bunch of tasks, like here's how you sign a lease application, or here's how you process it, here's the next step, and it would that ran smoothly for years. And now we've moved over to Lead Simple, which we run everything out of there now, because it's evolved as well from just a CRM.
And that's the main point I want to dig into this, that it's evolved over time.
That was the word I was looking for.
It's evolved over time. Again, this is not how it was at the beginning, right? And so for the perfectionists out there, don't worry about being perfect. Just get it done, right? Yeah. Like get it started. And then as you get better, as you create processes and systems for it, then you tweak them to how it works better, right? So it's evolved over time.
Correct. But going back for delegation, you got to document it. You got to have it in writing. You got to be able to take the time to teach it, and sometimes it's going to be 7 times, sometimes it's 14 times, but repeat the process, and then that's how you fully delegate. So yes, And they sometimes will do it better than you do, and there's other times they won't do it better than you. But if they can follow a checklist, follow the procedures, and they get it 99% or 98%, it's usually good enough.
Yeah.
And so, but majority of the time, especially as you scale and do volume, they can do it better than you can.
Yes.
And especially if they don't, then maybe you have the wrong person in that seat, or the wrong they're just not capable. Another thing we want to talk about was that there's a really great book on who, not how,
Love that.
by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. So it was a really good book on getting you in that mindset of for helping you delegate, helping necessarily, you don't always have to be the person to do it,
right.
you know, and it's finding that who.
Yes.
Yeah. And for a situation, and let them a lot of times develop the process and procedure. We've had 100%. A ton of times where we've had great people come up for a lot of the TTK stuff over the years. I had somebody in our office, she's no longer with us, but she created a lot of the processes 100%. And procedures and documented it on, and yes, I can sign off on it and be like, hey, that works really well. Yeah. And go ahead, run with it. Or, hey, I'd make some of these small tweaks and here's why. And then we would run with it, and that would be the process. So,
yes.
And same thing with some of our process and procedures today were created all by staff, because they're in the front lines and they're doing a day-to-day.
100%. Yeah. And you nailed it right there where you said mindset. I think this is all, as entrepreneurs, you have to have it's a mindset shift for sure. Right. Yeah. But once you can figure out how to get that right and start delegating, like, man, you will see your business grow and scale. I mean, we wouldn't have 5 businesses all growing and scaling at the same time.
There's times I'm like, why did I not just focus on one and get there a lot further? And it does create some of that. Number one, you have to become a master of delegation, or else it's not going to work.
100%.
And you have to trust the people and put the right. It comes down to people and putting the right. And you listen to the past episode, the one right before 214. They talked a lot about that. What's helped them.
Wes Owens and Will,
the founders and the entrepreneurs we had on that episode. That was their number one takeaway was, hey, the business really worked and scaled and got to where it is because of the right people that they put in place. So the number one's the right people. And we've made mistakes and gone up and down and put the wrong and then got the right. But it comes down to your leadership too we run a really good leadership team
and holding them accountable.
And then, but we delegate to them. They come up with they're our who for a lot of things. And our accounting manager comes up with has revamped a lot of the accounting processes.
And a lot, like I said, they really probably come up with better ideas than you. You're like, oh man, like, why didn't I think? Like, smart ideas, right? Come from your people.
Yeah. Some great ideas and great, like the budgets, the everything, and the processes for running those and the processes for a certain accounting procedure. And things have gone a lot better because it's just
100%.
And we delegate. We don't have any involvement. She'll present. We might have like, hey, just run with it. It looks beautiful. Or hey, have you thought about this? And so you can still be involved, but you're not doing the day-to-day of it and creating it. So, any last takeaways, Joni, on any challenges?
I would say, just don't overthink it, guys. Like, just, get started and, figure out a way how you can delegate more off your plate. I always say, like, create 2 buckets, create a $15 an hour bucket and a $200 an hour bucket, right? And the items on your $15 an hour bucket, those are the ones you want to start with, because that's not the highest and best use of your time, right? And so, and the last thing, I mean, for those of you that are struggling with that, and maybe you have some tips that you can share with us as well on delegation, we'd love to hear from you on your tips as well.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate everybody listening, and I hope everybody's having a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.
See ya, everyone.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there. Talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolfsDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.